Yo, what's up, guys? Happy Mother's Day, everybody. And joining us tonight for our Rescue Michigan Sunday night live stream is our friend Matt Wilk, attorney, and he'll be informing us on a lot of the incredible legal issues that have been taking place over this past week at the federal level, at the state level, and actually separate from all that, though, I gotta say, Matt, you have absolutely won the week with this takedown of the Detroit News of Craig Mauger, who for some reason feels obligated to get into personal arguments with people on X, which is probably not a good look for a reporter at the the paper of record in Detroit. So to give you the background, or to give our audience the background, you know the background, but to give our audience the background. The Mackinac Center posted this comment saying Michigan needs better teachers, not smaller classes. Smaller class sizes will do little to improve student performance. They linked to an article. And Craig says, Craig Mauger, reporter for the Detroit News, says, "Hey, Mackinac Center, do you receive funding from any charter school management companies or executives / founders of those companies? Seems like that would be an important disclosure as part of posting something like this." To which you replied, "Craig, I'm pretty sure you don't want to count the times the Detroit News publishes a press release disguised as news presented by an entity with self-interest. It's probably 5 to 10 per paper." To which Craig Mauger threw down the gauntlet, said, "Go ahead, list the 5 from today's paper here. Should be easy to back up your claim if it's true." And you did. you did. So here we go. This is 2 days ago. This was Friday's paper. But the point being, any given paper. Oh, hold on. Someone in the chat says my audio is not great. Does my audio sound okay to you, Matt?
It's fine to me.
Sounds like the wrong mic is picking me up. But I only have one mic, so I don't know what. Oh, here is this better? The fader wasn't all the way up, so maybe that was the problem. Sorry, folks. Hopefully that sounds better. Anyway, so Matt, page 4A. Report, invest in poor students. Ed Trust Midwest has been saying this for decades. When more money is available, they move goalposts. That's number 1. Page 1B, white men now minority on U.S. boards. Did Detroit News do this research? There's no source quoted. Page 1B, claims for jobless aid dip despite uncertainty. I've read the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports before, but they don't mention what they think is causing anything. So who had this? Did this come from some news release? Where did that come from? Page 3B, widespread ICE visits leave restaurant owners, workers rattled. Wow, nice piece of reporting from the Detroit News. Whoops, it's a story from the Washington Post. There's a copy of that story from the Washington Post. Page 4B, and this goes on. Page 4B, page 5B. One day, and it's so funny because Craig Mauger, journalist extraordinaire, decided to call you out on X for some reason. I don't know why he felt obligated to do that, but surely, Matt Wilk, you couldn't provide 5 stories in today's paper that are clearly just rehashes of news releases from people we like. You're like, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And I stopped. I could have gone on. And look, and I will say this. I had the benefit of Craig and I rode on the bus together back from the RNC. The RNC was in Milwaukee. Our hotel in Michigan was in Madison. He's a good guy. He works hard. He is at, as I said, a hollowed out core of the paper I delivered when I was a young boy. Okay. And I say this as a subscriber to the Detroit News and as a subscriber to the Detroit Free Press. I get them both. I read them. And every single time it's got 2 or 3 pages of content, stuff that I like, stuff that readers would get a lot of. If you read today's Free Press, there's a great story by ML Elric about Robert Davis, who's a guy that you know, who has filed complaints against 3 people, 3 of the mayoral candidates, including Sontiel Jenkins, might get kicked off the ballot. That's great original reporting. But why is the paper filled with garbage? Stories that are not fit for anything. The Free Press is way worse than the News. It's from all over their whole USA Today network of all these crap stories that have nothing to do with anything local. And yes, these people are lazy. They get a press release. They publish it Sometimes they will make a phone call, but that's about it. Today's Free Press had one about a complaint about Uber drivers in Wayne County Airport. And their process was get a press release, contact the other side, get another press release, and publish the 2 press releases. And that was the story. And do you ever look and say, is this the person who sent you this? Do they have an axe to grind? They almost always do. The story, Detroit News had a story that cancer research is underfunded, according to the American Association of Cancer Researchers. If that's not obvious at what's going on, that would never have caught it in a 1985 newsroom. They would have said, obvious bias, enough. You know, we don't need it. We got our own original reporting. Not anymore. Yeah,
there's always the big question, which is like, is this what actually is profitable? Is that why they're posting these things? And I know I always go back to that movie Network, where they had this news anchor who became very popular by being dramatic and erratic and all this other stuff. And then he got in trouble with the chairman of the board of the company that owned the news network, and got converted into becoming this big supporter of the corporate agenda. And the guy who owned the network loved it, but the ratings tanked. And so they had this big, I don't want to ruin the movie for people that haven't seen it, but the end of the story is that there's this conflict between the executive wants him kept on the air, even though his ratings are horrible, because no one wants to hear his crap anymore. And you wonder, like, why is the Detroit News and Free Press just running PR for the Democrat Party and for these special interest groups? Like, is this what people really want to read? I don't know. I mean,
you got me. I don't, it doesn't make any sense. I don't want to read it. I'm a subscriber. I'm sure there are people like me who used to get the newspaper and remember it. And then they look at it and they go, are you kidding me? What is this going on? And okay, it happens, right? I get it. But to claim that somehow with the Mackinac, the Michigan Capital Confidential or the Mackinac Center is doing it is untoward because come on, man.
Yeah, that's where that started. The whole exchange started because they attacked the Mackinac Center, and the Mackinac Center are extremely rigorous in their journalism. I mean, they make that point. I mean, obviously, they, I think, skew to the right, as any fact-based reporting would. But the fact is, they are rigorous, and they are careful about not going up. They're not nakedly partisan. They and they do disclose when they need to. And look, and for the Detroit News to try to call them out is outrageous.
It's outrageous. And on the topic of schools, this group reported nonstop on something called the School Finance Research Collaborative, which was supposed to be this thing that talked about how much money schools need. Okay. Look at who the authors were. It was a series of teachers' unions and liberal interest groups, and it was crazy. And you just ask the foxes how many foxes should be allowed in the hen house. It was ridiculous. And we report it as if it's fact, and we don't ask that next question that was a journalistic staple. Does the person saying this thing have an axe to grind? And if they do, maybe you still publish it, but you say, this person's got an axe to grind. Or maybe you just say, you know what? I'm not sure what you're saying is true. I need to verify that another way. But we don't do that. We're too lazy right now.
Yeah. Maybe just don't get into fights with news outlets on X. Maybe that's what they should be doing.
Maybe.
Nick says, my audio still sounds very tinny, but Matt sounds fine. So let me know, guys, in the chat if you agree. Because in my ears, I sound fine. So if there's something... Actually, there's probably nothing I can even do about it anyway. But please let me know if it's just Nick's experience or if you guys have the same problem. Patty wants to know if you replied to his tweets.
I don't think so.
No, I imagine that. Reply. Mark Ashley Price says Robert Davis from Highland Park. He himself is a former Highland Park school board member like myself, but with him, he stole money from the school district of Highland Park, which he served jail time for. One of the things he's known for is helping people being kicked off the ballot. Interesting.
Yeah, and recall that I believe he was the one that kicked Dugan off the ballot.
Wow.
Remember when Dugan had to run as a write-in?
Yeah.
And ML's got some stuff in the story about and there are 3 legitimate, you missed this box, you didn't fill out this piece of paper. And it's like, guys, I don't know what to tell you. How many times can you go through this without somebody looking at it for a second set of eyes or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let's get to some of the news of the week. Of course, the big story is the non-conviction, but also non-acquittal of Officer Christopher Schurr, which if I pan out a bit, you can see I've still got my Stand With Schurr sign in the background there. And I want to get your take on this, Matt, because you are an attorney, not a criminal defense attorney.
I am not, never have, never will.
But nonetheless, more experienced than myself in these matters. And we talked about this. I did a brief stream on Thursday because the jury came back. It was a hung jury. And according to the defense attorney, although I would suggest also supported by the statements of the prosecutor in the news conference, it seems it was overwhelmingly a jury that was not going to convict and was leaning towards acquittal, but only for one or two holdouts.
Correct. I read the same thing. And so people understand, in order to have a jury verdict in either direction in the state of Michigan and most of the United States, but not all of it, you must have a unanimous verdict. I think there are a few states that are still allow for holdouts. Michigan is not one of them. You have to have a unanimous verdict. And when you fail to do so, the system is designed to say almost there must have been some failure in the trial where you didn't have a unanimous verdict one way or the other. And therefore, it becomes a mistrial. Double jeopardy does not attach. And the prosecutor gets to make the decision, do I want to try this again? And now you're setting off the resources of the county. Do they want to spend their time and money trying this again? Or do they conclude from this matter that the case wasn't there? Now, I didn't watch every piece of evidence. If you and I want to go through it, we can. I know what I saw from news reports. And when the news reports are raising reasonable doubt in every single report across every day, that's sort of indicative of, maybe it was indicative of the result, but it's certainly indicative of how the case was out there.
Okay. By the way, Russ also confirms that I sound like garbage, which I don't know what to do about this, folks, because I sound fine to my ears. But Matt, do you hear me sounding?
You sound fine to me.
That's very strange. Well, I don't know, guys. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's a Facebook thing, because the two people complaining are both on Facebook. So maybe that's the issue. So I don't know. Sorry, we're just going to bear with it. So Matt, I'll give you kind of my summary of the case overall. And the one attorney who covered the case from start to finish, who live streamed the entire trial from opening statements to closing statements, was attorney Andrew Branca, who's an expert in self-defense law. And basically his take was, and I'd completely concur with this, was that the defense team was anemic and unfocused and unstructured throughout the entire trial. Their opening statement, the defense attorney, Michaela Hamilton, she read from her iPad with as much conviction as a 7th grade drama student. The closing statement was no better. The witnesses in the trial often had great testimony, but the defense was just not. They weren't hammering on the important points. They would just kind of drift from one thing to the next. In fact, at one point, Andrew Branca made the comparison. He said, "It sounds like." I think one of the witnesses was it was the police captain of the Grand Rapids Police Department, and he says it's as if it was take your dad to school day, and she's just asking questions because she needs to ask questions to complete the assignment, and just was going from one to the next without really paying attention to the answers. Now, I would say one thing the legal defense team definitely did well was bring lots of great experts, which the prosecution didn't. The prosecution they had the eyewitness neighbor who had nothing to say at all. They had the guy's friend who just testified that they stayed up all night getting hammered before he got in his car and went to go pick up a child to take to school. That's why he was out driving at 8 o'clock in the morning with a 0.3 alcohol level, was to take a child to school. The other eyewitness was the one that was doing was his passenger who was doing some of the filming. And then they had two quote-unquote experts. They had Seth Stoughton, who is a professional cop hater, who testified against the police at the Derek Chauvin trial, testified against the police at the Kim Potter trial. All he does is testify what cops are always wrong. And his partner, who co-authored his expert testimony paper, which why would you have two witnesses to say the same thing over again? But that's what they had. And that was it. Whereas the defense team had cop after cop after cop. They had lots of experts. lots of use of force experts, taser experts. Actually, the state had a taser expert witness who was awesome for the defense.
Well, that's a big thing right there, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so in that person's testimony, and I think one of the two other witnesses, they were able to get complete admissions of reasonable doubt. Like that, would he have been disabled if he had been hit with a taser, even though it was used
Right.
already? Oh yeah, of course. Did he know that? Oh yeah, probably. Like,
yeah,
okay.
I think. And by the way, there's some conflicting people in the chat. One says, "I hear you fine" on Facebook. Another says, "You sounded fine on Rumble last week." So I don't know, folks. There's nothing I can do about my sound. Honestly, right now we're live on air, so it is what it is. But anyway, yeah, I think broadly speaking, the testimony of the witnesses was just so overwhelming that the anemic performance of the defense counsel just didn't even matter at that point. And the fact that it was just so one-sided of a case.
Right. And understand, this is what, I was in law school in the mid-1990s, for 94 and 97. In 1995, OJ was put on trial. So that was big news. My evidence professor was the expert for CBS News. And there was all this discussion and whatever. And it seemed, it's LA, right? So it's going to be theatrical to begin with. Yeah. And there was a sort of theme of whether it matters or doesn't matter. And I think what happened is a lot of people sort of expected it. They expected a lot of theatrics in a lot of cases. And then when a defense attorney comes in and it's just boom, 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 think Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay, I mean, there was theatric after theatric after theatric by the prosecution. Defense went in there, went boom, 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 and it wasn't even close.
Yeah,
and
there was a lot of pounding the table in this trial for sure.
Yeah. And I don't,
Although compared to Kyle Rittenhouse, one point that Andrew Branca made was that the prosecutor dragged Kyle Rittenhouse through like 3 hours of hostile cross-examination, and Christopher Schurr took the stand, which his lawyers later admitted they weren't prepared to do. Well, they didn't say it that way. They said we weren't going to bring him on the stand, but then we thought we needed to, which was interesting admission right there. But people were speculating based on the defense's direct that they really did not do a good job at all preparing for Officer Schurr to take the stand himself. But anyway, he took the stand. He did okay. And on cross, Christopher Becker, the prosecutor, only dragged him through like a half hour of cross, like nowhere near what Kyle was up to.
He wasn't prepared either.
Yeah, that's true.
He wasn't prepared either. They thought it was going to be an expert versus expert. And it's a very tough call, right? Whether you're going to have your client testify or not. That's always a very tough call. How are they going to present themselves? It's different in practice than it is for real, right? It's like a sporting event. So, that's a tough call. But interestingly, it's not your call. It's the client's call. The client comes the last minute and says, I want to testify. They're going to testify, which sounds like more like what happened. But he did a really good job. That I think the jury understood what was going through his head, right? And because he used a phrase that I've heard before. It was from an article. It was around the time, I think, of Michael Brown, and it was a woman who was writing for some paper out east, and she said, I'm a Black woman, so I experienced this. But my husband's a cop, so here's the other side. And one of the things she said was, when he leaves the house, I say to him every day, make sure you do everything you can to come home. And he said that. Schurr said that. Schurr said, I didn't know whether or not I was going to come home. And for people, because here's the difference. Self-defense experts can talk about defending oneself in a private v. private situation. But when you're talking about a cop who experiences this every day, that's a different standard. They are not supposed to fight fair. They are not supposed, that's the movies, right? I mean, the time where the guy pulls out the knife and charges, and in the movies, the cop parries him and fights him off. No, what the cop does? Pulls out a gun and shoots him, because it's not supposed to be fair. You're supposed to follow what the police tell you to do. It does not make civil libertarians happy all the time, but that's the standard. Now, you could talk about why we're here in the first place. That's what the really interesting part of the story is.
Yeah, I think the defense could have done a lot better in terms of framing the issue. Like, they should have started right off at the opening statement with, "You guys are going to be angry that you're even here. You're going to be angry that if even in hearing about these charges, when you find out just how absolutely outrageous the circumstances were."
Yeah, and you don't really generally don't say that to a jury, because a jury finds that a little bit insulting. They know why they're there. They understand their civic duty. So I know that you don't say that, but you would say something like the question in this case is reasonable doubt, right? Which is a very, very high standard. What you're not going to find is reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
You're going to find something way, way, way more than reasonable doubt. Here's what you're going to hear. And now that they've seen the experts and the evidence, the question of whether you bring this back is absurd.
Yeah.
Right? This guy fills out a report and says, "This is what I was feeling."
Then put my remarks in closing then. Because now that you've heard all these experts, you're probably wondering, what in the world? I mean, this isn't just beyond a reasonable doubt. Most of you are probably fully convinced of its complete innocence right now.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, something like that. And what I found interesting was in the courtroom, the lack of politicization of it. Okay. So think back all the way back to like Rodney King, right? Think back to OJ.
Mm-hmm.
How much was made about the cops' word usage? If you recall, it was a big issue, right?
Yeah.
It was a big issue. They were trying to politicize it the whole way through. A lot of these things, we're going to politicize it. We're going to politicize it. We're going to politicize it. And this prosecutor didn't do that.
Well, what could they have brought in though?
What's that?
What could they have brought in though?
Oh, they could have dug into his history 40 years ago in social media. He used a bad word.
Oh no, the judge didn't allow any of that in.
Right.
He was a career criminal. The judge didn't allow the jury to know that.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and that's very important, because that's what the outside agitators wanted out of the trial. They want another George Floyd trial. They want another summer of protests. And by the way, protest asterisk, write me a check, or click on my link to pay me, hit my give, send, go. That's how this works. The reason why the same lawyer is running around picking up these cases, he's not doing it for free. He's doing it because he thinks it's a shakedown.
Yeah. So anyway, so first off, I wanted to ask you, because I floated this question on my show on Thursday, which is, the standard is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. A jury has to be unanimous one way or the other, or else it's a mistrial, and therefore potentially another trial. But here's my question. If a huge so the defense team has said a huge majority of the jurors would have voted to acquit. Doesn't that in and of itself prove a reasonable doubt exists? I mean, I understand why you would need to get all 12 unanimous to get a guilty conviction. And I understand also if you've got if you've got a case where it's an open and shut case, but some activist wants the guy not to be found guilty and they're going to vote not guilty no matter what the facts are. Okay. Well, that person might not be reasonable. But if you have a majority of the jury that wants to acquit, and you've got one or two holdouts that say, no, we want to convict this guy, shouldn't that be enough of a standard of not guilty? Because it seems to me, okay, maybe this guy's got coverage from the police union. Maybe. But an ordinary defendant doesn't have that. Every single criminal defense trial, you're expending hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Mm-hmm. Your life will never be the same, even if you're acquitted.
Correct. So
shouldn't 10 jurors wanting to acquit be enough for an acquittal?
Well, legally, can they go back at it? Sure they can. However, you as a prosecutor have prosecutorial discretion. You have the ultimate say. And again, recall the atmosphere. This was brought up by the folks at Michigan Enjoyer this weekend, because what's-her-face, Nessel, spouted off about it and called them out and said they made something up, and they didn't. because she had said about the time of the incident, if he refers the case to me, I'll take it. Which, first of all, you shouldn't be saying. Second of all, you made it very clear that if you were going to dismiss this case, she was going to step in or do something. And he didn't. He was his hand was sort of forced. And if now that it's there as a prosecutor, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
You basically said, let's say,
this is the big question: is he going to retry the case?
Is he? I don't know. It's a great question. But if I knew I needed to shoot some free throws and go 12 for 12, and the last time I went out, I went 2 for 12 or 1 for 12, I'm not trying again. I'm not close to where I need to be, right? You need to be able to convince everybody. And this is not the atmosphere that it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, this matter was followed by, see, I told you so, for 6 months in the media. Times change, right? I think a lot of people have looked at this, what we were being fed and how we were being trained to hate each other, to immediately sort of point fingers. I don't think that's around anymore. If I'm
the media lied about this case from start to finish. I remember at the time, like in 2022, Fox News was saying that Officer Schurr towered over this suspect, and it made it sound like he just shot him in the back of the head, like execution style, not as if they were fighting for control of a taser. And again, I remember hearing some people just recently saying, well, the taser had been fired and therefore the officer couldn't take that as a threat. And you had witness after witness after witness saying, well, there's this drive stun mode. Also, there's still these live rounds that are on the ground where they're rolling around that could shock them. There's all kinds of ways this could go south for the cop.
Well, and the other interesting one that people really don't get is exculpatory evidence you do not wisely put out in the media in advance. Okay, think back to Kyle Rittenhouse, right? Mm-hmm. He's toast. And it's almost like, you're playing poker, somebody's got a really good hand and they're like, oh yeah, please talk more about your stuff, because they got to trial. And by the time trial got there, it was a totally different set of facts. None of this had been reported, because a good attorney, they're not going to litigate it through the media, right? They're going to wait, and they get to the end and they win. And this happens again and again and again in these cases. And it doesn't matter, because what the prosecutor got out of it, what they wanted. I fought for blah, 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 and reelect me, right?
Yeah. Well, the Loyola family is demanding a second trial. And of course, they're also pushing forward with a civil lawsuit as well.
Right. And now the issue in the civil lawsuit will, of course, be sovereign immunity, governmental immunity. Because
so apparently I've been told that the city of Grand Rapids itself was removed from the civil lawsuit. It's only a lawsuit against the officer personally, which seems bizarre, because first of all, he can't pay. Second, so why are they even still pursuing this? For PR? I mean,
yeah. Oh, absolutely, 100% for PR. It's a walking advertisement for the next case. There are a lot of interactions between police and people. Most of them go fine, but there's so many that some don't go fine. And the problem is, it's the lottery theory of civil litigation, that you had this happen, and as a result, you won the lottery, and you didn't. And in this case, the person's dead. The argument is mostly by his own doing, and you're gonna write a number figure down on a piece of paper. Where's Officer Schurr going to get $100 million? Yeah. You know that. He's if the city, sure. But the city has a defense. You know what the city also has? Insurance policy.
Do you know anything about Ven Johnson, the lawyer for the civil lawsuit, the plaintiffs?
Ven Johnson, formerly of Figer Law.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that Ven, I mean, he's had some interesting cases. His last interesting case, which he failed on, which I thought was really fascinating, was he represented some of the families in Oxford. And they had sued the school, claiming that the school neglected its duty in some way or the other. And that case, I believe, went to the Michigan Court of Appeals. The Michigan Court of Appeals said, no, they're still covered by immunity. I'm not sure whether he went to the Michigan Supreme Court. I find that case fascinating because at some level, did the school have a duty that they failed to undertake? I don't know where that line is, and I'm not sure the law does either. But that's the last case I know from him. He's a big-time litigator. He does this stuff all the time. He loves this. And again, these guys love these marketable thing I can put on the air. This is who I represent. Is he going to get anywhere? I don't know. Great question.
You know what, guys? You are right.
How does this sound? Does this sound better now?
Oh, it sounds totally different to me. You put your radio voice on.
It sounds exactly the same to me. But yeah, the stream software had my camera microphone, not my microphone. So
you know, Sunday
that
I'll
was
make
the
an
problem.
investment.
Sorry, folks. I guess I sound like absolute garbage for the first half hour of the stream. So there you go. Oops. Lesson learned. Thanks, guys. Anyway, yeah. So I guess the big question. And by the way, we did a call to action, telling folks to contact the prosecutor and saying don't push this case any farther. You should let this one go. And he actually at his news conference said, I will not consider any kind of public pressure, which is obviously complete bullshit because it was public pressure that got him to bring the charges in the first place. He waited weeks, if not months after the incident to charge him. So
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. It's a tough question. Kent County isn't what it used to be. Okay. Kent County in people's heads, I think, is, a red county, a conservative county. I don't think so anymore. I think it
was +5 for Harris.
+5 for Harris. That's a big number. And but how do they feel about their own police officers? That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, here's what I say, and I say this to politicians who are in tough seats all the time. To people like, well, I can name some, but trust me, I've said this to a lot of them. If you're in a tough seat and you're voting as a Democrat, all you're doing is telling, first of all, you're frustrating your own base, and you're also telling them you might as well have a Democrat anyway. Like if you're Christopher Becker, you're the Republican county prosecutor, but you're prosecuting Christopher Schurr and you hate cops and and by the way, the way he conducted himself in this trial, you could argue, he was just zealously advocating for his client, but he came off as a cop-hating lunatic. So Republicans,
was he literally at the trial? Was he literally asking questions?
Yes, he was the sole prosecutor in the trial. There was no other attorney in his office that ran the whole prosecution.
Oh,
he was literally opening statement to close. He ran the entire thing himself.
That's very
unusual. Yes.
Very, very unusual.
Oh yeah. And he was browbeating all these police officers, browbeating all these experts. He came across as an ogre. It was atrocious. His closing statement was awful. It was completely, don't believe any of these experts. They all just do whatever the cops want them to do. It was really, really bad. Yeah, he did this all himself.
Just for everyone's reference, okay, in the United States of America at the federal level, for example, the Attorney General is Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi will not prosecute any cases. Pam Bondi does not argue before the Supreme Court. The person who argues before the Supreme Court is the Solicitor General. Mm-hmm. The United States Department of Justice has a bunch of district attorneys and their staff. They and their staffs, they handle all that. That's generally handled by somebody else. Dana Nessel probably never argued in a courtroom in her life, right? But that's not her job. She has other people to do that, right? And you generally try to find a subject matter expert. You're this or you're that or whatever. You're more of a manager of a department than you are just a prosecutor. The ultimate decisions are up to you, but I did not hear that.
Becker was the trial attorney for the prosecution. The only one who did any opening, closing, all the direct and cross, everything. He was the guy. And he did an absolute shit job too. So anyway, the point being, okay, so you're in a tough district. So now you've made all the Republicans hate your freaking guts. And the Democrats aren't going to vote for you anyway because they're going to vote for the Democrat. So what good have you done for your own cause?
Tell
Whereas
me, right. Tell me what the principle was. What was the principle you were defending? And if you articulate it here as you've articulated it, well, we're on the bias, cops are bad.
yeah.
Really? That you're going to run as a Republican with that as the principle? I don't think that really flies.
Yeah. And to generalize this, because because prosecutors are politicians. You know, we had a guy, there was a Republican some time ago in the state house named Pat Somerville, who was in a downriver swing district. It was a district the Republicans thought we have no business having this district because it's a swing seat. It's downriver. It's a Democrat district. But Pat Somerville worked his tail off knocking on doors and held the seat until he got term limited. So then a Democrat took the seat, Darren Camilleri, but still a Republican just until recently held the district. So you think Darren Camilleri is going to be a moderate Democrat who's going to be as completely to the center right as possible for Democrats, so because he's going to hold this tough seat? No, he ran as a hardcore left lunatic.
Yes.
And guess what? He's a state senator now.
Yes.
Like there's no reason whatsoever if you're in a tough seat to be moderate, because it does not work. It does not work for your base. It does not work for the other side. It's not going to, you're not going to be placate. You're not going to placate the other side.
Yeah.
You're just going to give them other reasons to lie about you. They'll just lie about other things. They'll make stuff if they want to.
That's right. That's right. And if there's something that's a local issue that affects you distinctly from your party brethren, that's a little different story, you know.
Yeah.
But when that in fact, Darren's district, I think, has all three of the people who state house members who are Darren's district are Riley Linting, Jamie Thompson, Jim DeSana, and they're all Republicans.
Yeah.
So it's a blue D Senate district. Only Republicans do that. Only Republicans come out of lockstep. You saw the state house, how many 56, 54 votes there were, which were absurd, ridiculous. Matt Colazar and Jason Morgan voted directly against the interests of their own people on the stupid transit opt-out. And do you think they're second guessing their votes? No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
And Republicans would take a good lesson from this, because at the end of the day, somehow Becker got reelected in 2024, I guess. But this case is going to be ancient history in 2028. I hope local Republicans run someone against him in the primary, even, because I would never vote for the guy personally. I'm not in Grand Rapids, but I don't understand. I know a lot of people do it, but because of the party affiliation thing, I don't want a Soros prosecutor to get elected, but I can't in conscience vote for someone who put in that performance that he just did, because he's harmed, not just his own county, but police officers everywhere.
That's correct. Those are tough cases. And let me give you an example of the flip of that. And there was a case in Detroit, and this was a joint task force between the feds and the local cops, and they had tracked this guy down, and he was hiding in an attic, and they knew he was there. And the feds are very, very patient. They take their time, and they waited him out. And this guy says, "I have a hammer. I'm gonna crack your skull." And they say, "Look, man, you come down there with the hammer in your hand, you're going to be shot." And they repeatedly warned him over and over again. And he came down and they shot him. And the family went nuts and demanded prosecution. And this was post Michael Floyd, post Michael Brown, but pre George Floyd, I think. And the prosecutor is Kim Worthy. She held a press conference and she said, "Do Black Lives matter? Of course they do. Of course Black Lives matter. You know what else matters? The truth matters. Facts matter." And she went on and on and on and on and on. And right off the cuff, she wasn't reading off her prepared remarks, and just eviscerated this whole thing and said, "I'm not charging the guy." And that was that. And the horde moved on to somewhere else. So is that what Chris Becker should have done? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was he thinking about?
He's made himself the center of attention.
Yeah. He's thinking about his weapon.
All right, we should move on to the topic because we're already 40 minutes in here. So There's been a lot of lawfare going on, a lot of lawfare in the Trump administration. So I guess we should, first of all, we have to talk about this clip from Stephen Miller. Let me play the clip here for those who haven't seen this, although I'm sure most of you probably have. But here we go. This is Stephen Miller. Here we go.
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day, Congress passed a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, which stripped Article 3 courts, that's the judicial branch, of jurisdiction over immigration cases. So Congress actually passed, it's called jurisdiction stripping legislation. It passed a number of laws that say that the Article 3 courts aren't even allowed to be involved in immigration cases. Many of you probably don't know this. I'll give you a good example. Are you familiar with the term temporary protected status, or TPS, right? So by statute, the courts are stripped of jurisdiction from overruling a presidential determination or a secretarial determination on TPS when the Secretary of Homeland Security makes that determination. So when Secretary Noem terminated TPS for the illegals that Biden flew into the country, when courts stepped in, they were violating explicit language that Congress had enacted, saying they have no jurisdiction. So it's not just, the courts aren't just at war with the executive branch. The courts are at war, these radical rogue judges, with the legislative branch as well, too. So all of that will inform the choice that the president ultimately makes, yeah.
All right. So there's a couple of aspects to this. I mean, the first thing broadly, because he certainly talked about how there's actually limitations to the jurisdiction of the federal courts, which they're ignoring all the time. But separate from that, though, there's also this question of habeas corpus and the notion that when you're subject to deportation, you have the right to challenge the legitimacy of your arrest. So you want to talk, Matt? Why don't you? You're the expert here.
Okay, well, so I'm certainly not an expert in immigration law, but I know enough to talk about it for a little bit.
Sure.
So the matter of immigration is generally handled by something called an Article 1 court. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Article 3 of the Constitution is the creation of the federal judiciary. These judges have lifetime tenure, and they're the check and balance. And what the legislature and the president did, and this has been supported by cases over centuries, is they have something called Article 1 courts. They are the ones that handle immigration questions. Okay, because the person who's showing up at our shores may have a argument to make and may not. But that's driven by Article 1, not Article 3. And that's been primarily by some of these judges ignored. Now, what you don't see in the news is the batting average. Okay. So if they go, one of the problems that's being really handled, and it's going to get before the Supreme Court very, very quickly, is the concept of the nationwide injunction. Okay. So if I have a law I don't like, and I know in the United States, there are 12 places where I have really liberal judges, I'm just going to file suit 12 times. This person, that person, the next person, the next person. And if I hit one, if I bat 1 for 12, I'm going to get a nationwide injunction against everything. Now, there have been multiple cases in the current cycle where the Solicitor General, again, that's the person that argues on behalf of the president, argues on behalf of the Attorney General, has said, Your honors, no matter what you feel about the facts of this case, it can't be the case that non-plaintiffs are covered by it, right? Because there are procedures in federal law for creating a class action. For example, there are times you can do it and times you can't. But we don't do it. They haven't been doing that. They've been saying, I think this law shouldn't apply anywhere. So the question of, so habeas corpus is Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2, and it says, shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. I think that's probably a step further than they want to go. But the more key question is this. When people talk about due process is the right to have your case heard by a court. Okay. Two very important things about that. Number one is which court? The MS-13 dude was heard by a Article 1 court twice. And both times they said, you're a member of MS-13, you must go. That's it. That is due process. Okay. Number two.
Yeah, it's not like you need to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. If the question is just, are you a citizen or not? Because you're not.
Right. And if you're making
you're not here legally. Right.
If you're making some sort of claim, is that claim believable? And that flavor changes from time to time. Now, what Biden tried to do is circumvent that process, which is very laborious, and say, everybody who's here under this, I'm going to blanket say you all can be here until your cases are heard in 6 or 7 or 8 years. Okay? Well, giveth and taketh away. Because Trump, he created an app, the CBP1 app. And he said, you're granted temporary status. And as soon as Trump took over, click, swipe that the other way. And everybody got a notice saying, your temporary status has been revoked. You must now leave the country. And oh, by the way, I think the app tracked their location and had other information and stuff like that. So the second most important thing is due process does not necessarily require you be in a specific location for it to occur. Okay, think of a routine criminal in the United States. All right, that person wants to go to trial. They want to be heard by a court and ultimately by a jury of their peers. Where do they stay when they're waiting for that? Well, in some cases, they're released on bond, personal or cognizant. In some cases, they're held in jail. They don't get to decide where they stay while this process is going on. And recall, in Trump, his first term, he had all these people that were going to apply for asylum. And what was the name of the process that he put in place? Remain in Mexico. Yeah. You must, not denying you due process. I'm telling you, you have to remain in Mexico before your case is heard. And now we took it one step further to say, your case is denied. Stay in Mexico. If you'd like to appeal it, go through the appeals process. Just
to go over briefly this whole asylum policy. The first rule of applying for asylum is you can't just go to any country on the planet that you'd like to live in. That's not how that works. The idea is you have to stop in the first country where you are safe.
First safe country.
So if you're fleeing from Guatemala and you come into Mexico, you can't just continue on to the United States. You have to stop in Mexico and apply for asylum there first.
Yes, correct. And that was set out because think about the time when this treaty was passed. The Treaty on Asylum was passed in the mid-1950s, if I recall correctly, and you had the Cold War going on. And what if people were fleeing Yugoslavia and they walked into Austria, what they didn't want them is just continuing on their way to France or Spain or wherever. So they said, no, you have to apply for asylum in the first safe country. Now, understand, asylum is supposed to be the government is persecuting me, not gangs are persecuting me, not the economy sucks, not I can't find a job. That's not the same. Now, these people all have been trained to make the argument, well, you see, the gangs, they pay off the cops. So it's really the police that are against me because the gangs and the police all work together. So I'm really afraid from the police too. That's a scripted response. And so these people show up and say they all have this, they're all reading from the same script.
Yep.
And does the immigration court operating under the direction of the executive branch buy that? Now, if you've walked through El Salvador, boy, that's a tough argument to make. If you walk through Mexico, who overtly has said, no, our country is safe. Well, You're not lying in the first safe country, are you?
Yeah. So we do need to move on. But I want to get back to this original thing. So Stephen Miller comes out and says we might suspend habeas corpus if the courts do the wrong thing, as applies to the immigration policy. What he's essentially saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what he's essentially saying is the Article 3 courts, meaning these rogue federal district inferior court judges, can't just usurp the power of the immigration courts created by Congress.
It's two very different things. So habeas corpus is the right to be freed from unlawful detention. Okay.
Yeah.
However, in the case of the cases that they're talking about here, it's temporary detention, and then they're just shipping you out. So at that point, there's no unlawful detention. You're just in another country, perhaps the country that you came from. Okay, so habeas corpus doesn't exactly apply there. It's not normally, to my understanding, used in the immigration concept. But what they are saying is that there is this problem where the people are going through Article 1 courts and getting a bad result they do not want. Their TPS is rejected, their asylum claim is rejected, blah, blah, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they're being told to leave. And they think that the way they're going to handle this is, we're going to then find an Article 3 judge and say, well, you see, there's all kinds of craziness. So I believe there are, and I'm looking at the temporary docket so the Supreme Court has now publicized what's called its emergency docket. Okay, these are cases that go through the process more quickly because of expediency. Okay?
It's an unusually busy docket, I believe, these days.
Yeah, it's a very busy docket, and previously it didn't, frankly, much exist. But one of the things, and I'm looking at, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 active cases involving Trump executive orders and actions, and every 6. There's one that's having to do with the main transgender thing, which is, I think, fascinating too. And every single one of them, the Solicitor General is saying, whether you agree with this or not, Your Honor, you can't have one plaintiff come in and shut down an executive order. You can have them come in and shut down the executive order as it applies to them. That's how it works, cases and controversies. But to say, I don't like this law, and therefore I'm going to view the law as inapplicable to everybody, that shouldn't be done by the district court judge in Washington, for example. And that's happened over and over and over and over. And until they shut it down, there's a problem.
What do you think about John Roberts has been blabbing off saying, like, he thinks that, it's great that the courts are shutting down the executive and the Congress, but, sometimes that's a generic statement. But do you think it's going to be a situation where Roberts goes with the Democrats on this, and we have to rely on?
No. Let's see. 1, 2. Let's see. I'll do the ones that involve the district courts. U.S. Schilling. Nope. Roberts approved the application. Let's see. Pending of removal of Fabian Lagunas Espinoza. Stay denied. Abrego Garcia, that was the one, like, go back and try again, guys. AFSCME versus OPM, Trump versus JGG. There's all these ones where no matter what he said, I know how he voted. And there's not a single one of them that says Roberts voted to approve the application. He does not like the bespoiling of the court. That's always been his thing. And what he says to courts is, stay in your lane. And when these courts, which they have done, get out of their lane, get back in your lane side.
Yeah, that was the Abrego Garcia case. Was the Supreme Court says, yeah, why don't you clarify what you mean about facilitating or effectuating the return? Because they were being very polite to this judge who was way out of her lane, and then she just ran with it. So now they're going to have to come back and.
Well, I mean, it goes back to the original, the Trump case from last June, where Roberts wrote the opinion and he said, guys, no, and before you get all up in your, whatever to do this again, let me lay out some ground rules. This is your lane, court. You cannot second guess that. You can't go delve into these motives. Okay. So they have had a lot less success at the actual Supreme Court than they have had media coverage of it. So, and then when these come, and normally what they like to do, people should understand this. Normally, they like to clear their docket going into the summer. They like July off. And
not to change the subject, but I remember you were talking about this case involving objectionable materials in school libraries that was heard by the court recently. Is there any update on that yet?
Nope. It'll probably be released in late June, early July. That last week is always very, very busy. Mahmoud versus Taylor. They had a case after that. It involved, had some surprising commentary on the allowing an open charter school program. Oklahoma has an open charter school program. Any organization can do it, but can they exclude a church? And as an example, I think they had like a STEM school, and they had Chinese immersion, and they had a couple other things. They had Native American, because it's Oklahoma, Native American school. The question was, could a church? And Roberts it's a 4-4. Amy Coney Barrett is off. She's undoubtedly, she's pretty supportive of that. In fact, the reason why she's recused is I think one of her really good friends is arguing on behalf of the church group. And if Roberts, it could be a 4-4, but it could also be a 5-3, because he asked very specifically, hey, if you have this open to everyone, how is not just excluding a church a violation of free exercise? That's another school's case that would be fascinating, because parents very much are looking for school choices, and they don't like the Michigan. We hate the results we received so far. And the answer, we always get to the question, going back to your original, the Craig Mager thing is, well, we need more money. That's going to solve our problems.
Right.
So we'll see.
All right. So moving on, because we have to finish up some topics here. Have you seen this? This is the video of, I hope this is going to be not much of an intro. Let me get to the clip of
where he was protesting its openings. We want to bring in.
I want to see if we got the actual footage here of this congresswoman, and then also the mayor of Newark were arrested for storming this ICE facility.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have actual video of this. I hope this clip has video.
But even if it here did not, President Trump, who
They're-
also referenced, there are
They're not gonna
The
show
news
that.
doesn't want to show the video. They don't want to show the video.
They absolutely do not.
So there's this woman was one of the two congresswomen, and then there was the mayor of Newark, and so the congresswomen, I guess, are protected by as members of Congress. They have the right to enter, although they didn't provide 24 hours notice. Interestingly, and they assaulted some ICE officials, which is still assault and battery.
Huh? Sounds like insurrection-y to me, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little insurrection-y, interfering with the federal
you
officers.
tussled with. I thought there was like 5 years in prison immediately when you tussled with the.
After the Officer Schurr case, I don't like the word tussle at all ever. It's felony assault and battery. That's what it is. So the mayor of New Jersey was arrested. He does not have that immunity. So as I understand it, the Trump administration is going to go hard on these people. And I hope they do.
As they should.
Yeah.
Look, the concept, and look, man, I'm a Gen Xer. Baby boomers drive me nuts sometimes.
Mayor Ross Baraka.
And one of the problems they have is they love this 1960s protest style. We're going to have a sit-in. We're going to have a die-in. We're going to have a this. We're going to have a protest. You can't just write your congressperson. You can't just, win an election, which they have won, right? But what are you going to do when you get in there? Yeah. You're going to say something. You're going to wave a magic wand and set everyone free. It's all grandstanding. And when push came to shove, literally, not figuratively, you decided that would be a good place to make a stand. Just
I think I might have found the clip here. Let me see if this works. This is Fox, so it might be more likely to be a clip.
Right now, he was on a tour of Delaney Hall with three other members of.
We just saw
Hall with 3 other members of New Jersey's congressional.
Watch the woman in the red coat here.
Here's what we know right now. He was on a tour
That's okay.
Of Delaney
punch.
Hall with 3 other in Newark. Here's what we know right now. He was on a tour of Delaney Hall
Right in the
with
left
3 other
shoulder.
members of New Jersey's congressional delegation. Federal officials blocked his entry. We're told that an argument erupted, and Baraka attempted to enter through some sort of side gate. Those on scene say federal agents threw organizers to the ground. You can see him there. He's circled, trying to get through that gate and confronting a federal official there.
So yeah, you could clearly see the congresswoman in red. I forget what her name is, but multiple assaults on these ICE officers right there.
I mean, the standard's been set, hasn't it?
Absolutely has.
That looks pretty insurrection-y to me. And I was told that when you're not following the rules and you're trespassing and you push a cop, and you might think you're right, you might think you're there for a good reason, but that is assault. And I think I was relatively young when I learned that you simply don't do that ever.
No, it's not the way to do it. Although Dana Nessel has dropped the charges against the U of M protesters. So the argument, I guess, and it goes to this kind of same kind of thing, because they had this ongoing demonstration at the Diag, and at some point the cops just said, we're going to clear all these people out. And at that point was when they resisted, and that was where the charges stemmed from, was them resisting the officer's instructions. But the thing is, you're not supposed to resist. You're supposed to file suit for the grievance after the fact. You're not supposed to disobey if the order is unlawful, you should still obey the unlawful order, and then you file the lawsuit against the cops for the unlawful order. You don't violently resist the unlawful order, because then there's violence involved, and then that's when bad things happen.
And it's not a defense to it, right? It's not a defense to it. Cop says, get out of your house, and I would decide I want to punch him because I don't think I have to leave my house. That's a crime for punching him, whether you have a good reason to or not.
Yeah.
So the interesting one in that case was that Eli Savitt never brought charges. It had to go to Nessel to bring charges, because our Soros prosecutor in Washtenaw County, under no circumstances, is going to bring charges in that case.
Yeah. Anyway, one other story. So the other thing I want to cover tonight is there's been a bit of a shakeup in Washington. Ed Martin, who was the acting attorney general until Pam Bondi was confirmed, and was then appointed by Trump to be the U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C., had his confirmation spiked somehow by U.S. Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, hardcore America Laster, pro open borders, but still only one of several in the majority. I think it was 53-47 is the majority, but he's on the Judiciary Committee. So somehow that led to him being able to single-handedly spike the nomination of Ed Martin.
Were they doing it by some sort of unanimous consent to go through cloture? I don't know.
Probably. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I imagine it's like, for example, we have this ridiculous thing called the blue slip, which is that if the president appoints someone to become a federal judge, and either of the 2 U.S. senators from the home state of the district object, then they just won't move forward with the confirmation. This happened to Tom Leonard, Speaker of the House in Michigan, great guy, appointed by President Trump in his first term to become a federal judge. And the Democrats, Stabenow and Gary Peters, said no. And Trump just goes, okay, then. Or the U.S. Senate goes, okay, then. Like, why did Republicans in the majority of the U.S. Senate allow the Democrats to kill that nomination? I don't know, but they just did. So for whatever idiotic procedural reason, Tom Tillis alone was able to, and by the way, Ed Martin, before this, was like the head of Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum, like extremely conservative, hardcore, outstanding attorney. The guy you absolutely would want to have is the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., because doesn't he there's some special role the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. has. I think it's going after all the federal corrupt officials.
It might be, yeah. That's probably what they have jurisdiction over.
So Tom Tillis somehow blocked Ed Martin from being the U.S. Attorney for D.C., which, if that position is not filled by the end of May, it goes to, get this, U.S. Judge left-wing extremist Judge Boasberg would get to appoint the federal prosecutor for DC.
Yes,
It's incredible.
But the end is even like crazier.
Well, the end of the story is that now, Trump has now appointed Pirro nominated Jeanine Pirro to be the U.S. attorney, and Ed Martin has now been appointed to be the chair of the attorney for the Weaponization Committee.
Yes.
Within the U.S. Department of Justice.
And what did Tom Tillis say about Jeanine Pirro?
I think he said she was great, didn't he?
Unbelievable, lavish, the best. She'd be awesome. Unconditional, like I think she might even use the Trump language, just like full unconditional endorsement.
His grievance against Ed Martin does not make any sense. His grievance against Ed Martin was he represented some January 6th clients, which he has every right to as an attorney.
Which when I see something like that, it always makes me think
this is not their true story.
That's not. There's something further in the past that they're like, and I ain't never gonna vote for this guy. You know, there's the thing is, people forget politics is about that, right? So you might have someone, and there's the regular rough and tumble of politics, and you get together. But there are some people who you just put on a blacklist. You know, during your campaign, you called out my wife about something or whatever, you know, and they're like, nah, that's beyond what's acceptable. So they just won't, and they won't, and that's sometimes within the same party and sometimes across party lines. Yeah.
Well, I hope Jeanine Pirro will be as outstanding as Ed Martin would have been in that role. I'm sure she probably will be, probably. But even still, I think it's disgraceful what Tom Tillis did. And, you know, it just goes to, this is why I don't like rhinos to be on the U.S. Senate, why I'm not a big fan of people like Mike Rogers, because they do the same kind of crap. They're going to find they're going to find their battles with Trump, and they're going to use it for leverage. And it's just all bad news.
I'm waiting for him to call you, by the way.
Who?
Mike Rogers.
Oh boy, that'll be a fun call.
I would not. He's called. I can tell you, he's called a lot of people that were really much against him, and spent a lot for a guy running for office. A lot of time. That's not a person that's a non-donor. You know, you don't spend hours on the phone with somebody. And
somebody contacted me once about what it would take to get me to support him. I was like, well, nothing, because he spent his entire career proving himself to be against my values. So why would I take anything he would say to me as a condition to get elected to be taken seriously? And that was the
there was big news on the other side of the aisle announced
yesterday. What's that?
Joe Tate. Joe Tate is also running for Senate.
Oh,
U.S. Senate, correct. Yes. So we got Haley Stevens, we got Mallory McMorrow, we got Abdul El Sayed, and we got Joe Tate. And then on the gubernatorial side, it's Benson and Gilchrist.
Yeah.
And in great fashion, wrapping us all the way back around the beginning, the Detroit News published a piece saying, insiders, Mike Dugan shoots down rumors that he's interested in being president of the University of Michigan. Who do you think put those rumors out?
Yeah, no kidding.
Was it Mike Dugan? No, it wasn't. It's somebody that has a D after their name. So why are you publishing that? Obviously, to try to get him out of the race because they think they can win if he's out of the race. Just some real journalism.
Yeah.
Is once.
Right. I got to catch up on some chats here. Carl Kurtz says, yep, Slotkin is so much better. Carl, I've been over the lesser of two evils thing many times on this show. I'm sure I'll be many times again, so I will pass on that for tonight. Mark Ashley Price. Thomas is my favorite Supreme Court justice, perhaps my favorite period. He's awesome, as is Alito. Rumble chats. I got some Rumble chats. Hans says, thought immigration court is under Article 2, no Article 1 created by Congress.
Really Article 1. It's created by a legislative act, so it counts as an Article 1 court.
Yep. Also says detainment is not punishment for immigrants waiting for a case. Either is being deported. Right. It's not a punishment to be sent home. Chris G says there shouldn't be any effing courts spending time or money on any of these illegals. Well, there has to be some, because what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But anyway, Hans says normally you could do temporary restraining orders for those before then his case gets fully adjudicated, maybe found on executive orders or laws unconstitutional, which would affect everyone. I quite follow that whole comment, but there you go. Hans says, don't think Thomas is going to have quite time in the RV this summer. Yeah, it's a busy time. It's a busy 4 years we've got.
Unless they very well make. I can see this happening, and a lot of Jonathan Turley has said the same thing. He's way smarter than I am on this stuff, and he said he can see it coming, where the court just says, "Guys, no more nationwide injunctions." Period. Because the Supreme Court is not going to accept a case on a person.
Congress should say this. In fact, the House even passed such a bill, but apparently the U.S. Senate, even though the Democrats have promised to kill the filibuster immediately, they just want to leave the filibuster in place and just allow that to continue on for the rest of their time. And
I don't know whether they're going to put pieces of the. I'm very curious to see what counts as reconciliation, because normally the connection is is it connected to the budget? Well, certainly. The amount of money you spend on illegal immigrants is connected to the budget. How much of that can they squeeze into a reconciliation bill? That's a great question, but I can foresee that some of that too.
Yeah, that'd be one way to do it. And frankly, Congress needs to start acting on these things. If they removed one judge, that would put all the rest of them into line. And
they'd love to have the Democrats would love to shift the conversation away from immigrants and to procedure, just like they did with this guy. Remember when it was this? He's a Maryland dad. Yeah, he's a Maryland dad. Yeah. And then they went. Now all this crazy stuff has come out.
That's the problem, is that Democrats have overplayed their hand to the point where the American people are like, you got to check these damn judges because they're crazy.
And I think the American people are waiting to see how this all turns out. And there is no, I mean, just think about where we were 2 years ago. Was there enthusiasm for some sort of immigration deal? Yeah. Now? No. Yeah. The immigration deal will be no. That's the deal. It's like the Godfather. My offer to you is nothing, right? And that's where they are. That's how much that window has shifted on some of these things. So,
yeah. All right. Well, before we go, we have to at least do a little bit of an update on Trump world, because there has been some big news this past week on foreign policy. Russia had their Victory Day parade a couple of days ago on the 9th. Absolutely huge event. There was many world leaders there, including Xi Jinping from China and Lula from Brazil and a whole lot of other people. And there has also been a development with the first off, Europe put out an ultimatum to Russia and said, we demand you have a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, and or we will sanction, we meaning Trump, will sanction you. There will be secondary sanctions and tertiary sanctions. And Russia, Putin came back, I think it was the day after the parade, or the very last thing in the celebration, a big speech about this, and said, here, tell you what, there won't be a ceasefire. There won't be any unconditional ceasefire. We need to have direct negotiations with Ukraine. It has to happen now. And in fact, we will have them as soon as this Thursday in Istanbul, where we left off, and threw the ball back into Trump's court, which it sounds as though Trump was absolutely on board with the Europeans. He had just posted on Truth Social recently. He had made this post where he said something like, let me pull it up. But he said, negotiations between the two sides continue. Very odd use of the intransitive there. But then he said, we're going to have the 30-day ceasefire. He was very equivocal. He was like, ideally, we'll have this ceasefire. Hopefully, there'll be a resolution. At least we can find the.
You mean that conducting diplomacy over Truth Social isn't the best idea?
No, it really isn't. Here, I'll find this in a second here. But anyway, so Trump made this announcement, and immediately all the Europeans were like completely empowered and on board. And yeah, we're going to demand the ceasefire, total unconditional ceasefire, Kellogg's plan. Absolutely 100%. That's what we're going to do. And then after, I'm still looking for the original tweet, but then what happened was Putin came back with this other comment, and then that led Trump to this, where he says, President Putin of Russia doesn't want to have a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine, but rather wants to meet on Thursday in Turkey to negotiate a possible end to the bloodbath. Ukraine should agree to this immediately. At least they will be able to determine whether or not a deal is possible. And if it is not, European leaders in the US will know where everything stands and can proceed accordingly. So the thing is, the whole game of this ceasefire is we want to rearm Ukraine. Just put a pause on the war and we can rearm Ukraine, and maybe in a month or even a year, whatever time it takes. As soon as we can, we'll get back on the offense again, but we just need to have this time to rearm. And Trump didn't get this memo. So Russia comes back after this big victory parade where all these countries are marching with them and all this stuff, and says, no, we want to have negotiations, not a ceasefire. Negotiations first, then a ceasefire. In fact, we can negotiate a ceasefire. And so to the Europeans, they're like, fuck. This is not what we wanted. We wanted a ceasefire, not negotiations. And Trump's like, hey, negotiations, great, let's do negotiations. And the Europeans are all furious about this now. But this, I think, is this is Russia's last off-ramp for Trump on this. Because Trump is now sending missiles. He's sending Patriot missiles to Ukraine. And Putin is like, okay, we can have a negotiation. We'll see what happens. When negotiations fall apart, and they will fall apart. There is no way Ukraine and Russia are going to get to any agreement and any negotiations. At that point, Trump, you can walk away. You had a chance to walk away. You didn't take it. You can still walk away from this. But if you don't walk away here, guess what's going to come next? There's going to be a huge Russian offensive. And at that point, it's going to be your war, Trump. And we'll see. Trump says, I'm starting to doubt that Ukraine will make a deal with Putin, who's too busy celebrating the victory of World War II, which could not have been won, not even close to the U.S. When Trump posted this recently in the other tweet complaining about how the U.S. won World War II, not Russia, who paid like 20 million Russian lives, I thought this is very offensive. This just sounds like bitterness. So whatever. But now he says, have the meeting. So, the ball is now in Ukraine. Ukraine's already thrown the ball away. Ukraine's already said there's going to be no meeting. No meeting. There'll be no meeting in Istanbul or anywhere else. We're not going to negotiate. So,
I'll tell you this one little tidbit. I've been in commercial real estate for 25 years. I never turned down a meeting. You want to talk? We always talk. Whether we're miles away from a deal or right on the cusp of a deal, you just do it. It's something that you do.
Well, Trump's been saying over and over again, he keeps on saying we're this close to a deal, which we're not.
This close. We're far away. We're this close. But what he doesn't do is the whole we'll meet to meet. We'll agree to conditions to meet. Like for him, that's the meeting isn't what are you talking about? So this was the whole thing with the China and the tariffs, and they're like, will you reduce the tariffs in order to induce us to meet? And he's like, why would I do that? I'm not going to, we should just meet. You're not giving anything away. I'm not giving anything away. Why would we not do that? So I think that's one that's always been a little bit of a struggle.
Yeah. Well, the gauntlet's been thrown down, and Trump appears to be saying that Zelensky should take the meeting, and he's not going to. He's already said he won't. So I don't know. I don't know what Trump is waiting for. Trump put out the Kellogg plan, which is a bad plan to begin with, but he put it out, and Ukraine said, "No, we're not going to do a scintilla of this. We're not going to even acknowledge Crimea as lost. We're not going to do anything. We're going to concede nothing." And now Russia said, "Let's meet and talk," and Zelensky said no. So at what point does Trump walk away from all this before this war becomes his? I think this is like his last chance. Before he even got sworn in, I had said the one thing Trump needs to do is to not get sucked into Ukraine. And he keeps getting sucked into Ukraine. He's getting sucked back into Ukraine. They had this call with these Europeans with Schultz and not Schultz, Merz, and with Keir Starmer and with Macron, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to put the screws on. We're going to put the screws on Putin." And then in front of all these other leaders that came out, European leaders, Vucic was there, and Fico was there, and
they're really brave now that it's springtime and summer, and they don't need his natural gas.
Yeah. And did you see the chart that I think it was I think it was Fico had to fly like all the way around Europe to get to Russia because they closed their airspace off. Yeah, it's anyway. So Putin says, yeah, hey, look, we can talk to Ukraine. You have to come to the meeting.
Yeah,
and
just talk. Just talk. I mean, I don't think you're giving anything away, but are you miles apart? Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the worry that he finds
is going to end on the battlefield. It's going to end on the battlefield, and it's not going to end with a Ukrainian victory.
I mean, Trump finds war personally wasteful.
Yeah.
Like you destroy things as a real estate area, like you're blowing up this building for no other reason than to blow up the building. It doesn't get you anything, right? It's wasteful. And your guess is way better than mine as how this is going to resolve itself.
Well, I mean, look at what's happened so far. Ukraine has lost territory and won none. They've depended upon the United States aid for the entire conflict. They are now demanding more Patriot missiles, more support. Their goal is to get us into the conflict as an active participant. That's the only way they win this. There's no hope in Europe. Europe doesn't have any troops to send. They don't have any weapons to send, hardly at all anymore. And Russia has. They have They have more industrial capacity to build more weapons and missiles than the entire collective West combined. And if that wasn't enough, they have China and North Korea who have weapons and money and people. Okay, Korea doesn't have money. They have people. And they just admitted that actually, yes, there were some North Koreans that were fighting in Kursk.
Yeah, they were captured and they thought they were fighting South Koreans, and then when they were captured, they're like, "You don't look South Korean." I don't know what that's wild to take for North Korea effectively to be selling their troops. They can't have that many. They couldn't have.
There couldn't have been that many to begin with because they were hardly even caught. I mean, they're like, oh, we got a couple of prisoners that were North Korean, but it wasn't like indisputable evidence of North Korean participation. So there's like maybe a battalion mixed in here and there with people, which was probably so. According to Russia, which take it for what it is, they say North Korea wanted to send their people in because they wanted the experience and the training. Which, I mean, you do get experience from battle. But anyway, the point being, Ukraine is worn out. Their economy is completely ruined. And the longer this goes on, the more unbalanced this is going to get. And why Trump would want to be tied to that wagon? This is Joe Biden's war, as he keeps saying. Trump is good about saying this. This is Biden's war, but at some point that becomes not true anymore. So why not get out?
Very tough to parse through all these, because you hear this is what's being said. That's what's being very tough to parse through it all. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens in the next coming weeks. So we'll see if Trump takes the off ramp. I pray to God he does, because Keith Kellogg is clueless. These guys that think Russia's going to just fall apart any day now, they've been saying that for the past 3 years, and look what it's gotten them.
Yeah.
So, all right, I think, guys, this has been a big stream. A lot of talk about. I think there's a lot of happier developments coming in the legal front than there is on the foreign policy.
Yeah, there's great. The Supreme Court's general procedure is to wrap everything up by about the end of June. There's probably 20 or 30 cases left to be decided. Some very, very important ones, like the one we talked about schools.
Yep.
And more. In addition,
the nationwide injunction thing, I think, is the biggest thing.
The nationwide injunction thing. If they take that step, and there was a concurring opinion on something else where I think it was Gorsuch and Alito and Thomas all came out and said, "Look, we were just putting this note out there to say these nationwide injunctions are getting out of hand." Yeah. And you pick up a couple other people and they say, because Roberts, that's been his thing, the integrity of the court, and when that court steps out of the lane, that challenges his integrity. You saw that last June.
And this Judge Zenas, the court checks her, and she just lies about what the Supreme Court said.
Yeah,
the Supreme Court says I can bring these people back to the United States from El Salvador. Sure, they did.
Right, and then they look at her and they're like, "Yeah, right." And it's funny because you don't have an enforcement mechanism. Who are you going to use? You're going to hold the Trump administration. I think I read this in criminal contempt. That was in a news report.
Yeah.
Who brings criminal charges in this country? The Attorney General. Is the Attorney General going to go after themselves? They are not. And that's the way the system is designed. The legislature doesn't have the right to arrest people, nor do courts. They're all through the executive branch. And they're all through their own legitimacy. And if they keep doing this, they're going to keep chipping away at it.
Yep. Chris G on Rumble says defund those districts. I did hear that was being considered. I doubt it. And by the way, speaking of defunding districts, the other big thing that's been going on is Congress is talking about their budget deal. And one of the things that just came up was I don't know if you guys have heard about this thing, the state and local tax deduction, SALT, which is basically a scheme by which the federal government, i.e. federal taxpayers, i.e. you and me, the red states fund blue states because they give you this deduction for all the incredible high taxes that the blue states have, like New York and California. The federal government will reimburse them.
Well, yeah, and remember that the prior to the Trump tax reform in 2017, there was no state and local tax limitation. So if you worked in California and you made $400,000 a year and you paid a 10% state tax, that was $40,000 that you could itemize and take off your tax return. One of the ways to pay for this, pay for the lowered rates and the consolidation of rates and some of the stuff on the business side, was to cap that. And the current cap is $10,000. Now, one of the arguments is $10,000 in 2017 is very different than $10,000 in 2024. That's kind of a fair argument, I think. But the guys, and remember, this is a very tight Congress, so you've only got 2 or 3 seat margin. And some of the people in New York and New Jersey, California,
all New Yorkers, at least Stefanik and all the rest of them demanded that we keep the SALT credit in there.
Right. What they want is that SALT limitation increase from 10,000 to higher. Yeah. Now, in the state of Michigan, you can get to SALT if you are a reasonable wage earner and you buy a car. What's that?
I think they want no cap.
There is a discussion of there being no cap or to have a cap of $50,000. I think the president had floated 30. But you're right. What it does is it allows these blue states to charge higher taxes with impunity for certain types of people, because those people who do an itemized deduction can get that money back. Doesn't apply to the average Joe and the person who's making $75,000 a year. They don't get very much in the way of benefit from that.
Yeah. All right. Mark Ashley Price. Trump is the greatest president in the United States of America. At least in our lifetimes. Great show tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Very appreciate it. On Rumble, Chris G says, Rogers for Senate. He has changed. Please forgive him, Adam. Why is Rogers' political future contingent upon my support?
I didn't realize it should say Adam D'Angeli.
Kingmaker.
Kingmaker. Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is a fascinating cycle, because I think one of the things you've seen is, there's always this argument like, who knows what's going on the inside? The insiders know what's going on the inside. You've seen a fair amount of Democrats resign or we're going to run for something else.
Yeah, they're nervous.
Leave. So does that mean that they see something that the kind of political punditry that's on the news doesn't see? Maybe.
Yeah. Chris also says Zelensky is genocidal to his own men. Yep. It's been a very bad outcome for the young men of Ukraine for sure. And some women too. All right, folks. There was a question earlier. Someone asked, don't you have a official position? Yes, you're a state committee member, correct?
I'm the vice chair of the policy committee and on state committee. So luckily there's been not too much really going on in that regard. I think I went to the lattice thing that was put on by Chair Jim Runstead. It's a Kentucky Derby event. It was really cool.
How was that?
Well, I mean, Sovereignty beat Journos, so it's a great event. Who can top that? No, it was really cool. It was Mike Cox, Rick Scott, and John James were the 3 headliners. That was pretty cool. And Rick's got a great long history, and he's a great senator out of the state of Florida. And it flew up, and of course, whenever Floridian comes to Michigan, what temperature was like 52 or something. So the guy's freezing to death. Thinks it's going to be 80 because that's where he's coming from. But no, it was a great event. I think that has calmed down. I think that people are understanding sort of what this can and cannot do. We do have an election next year where we're going to have nominations, Attorney General and Secretary of State among them. And those are very important races. It's very important that we have somebody that can win, not someone that just espouses what you think is the right thing. There are some names I've heard floated, especially for Secretary of State, one name in particular that I do not support. I do not care whether you
I can imagine a couple of them.
I do not care whether you claim yourself to be an election integrity expert. You are not. And give me somebody who's gone into court and won and changed things permanently and effectuated change and knows all these rules. That's the person I want, not the person who pretends.
Yep. You got any events coming up, Matt?
No, we had our transit event. It was phenomenal. We had about 80 paid people, and people were very surprised. So last time I said the numbers were 3 and 4, and the questions to which those were the answers were: the average smart bus has 4.4 people on it. So when you see a bus go by and there's almost nobody on it, that's pretty much about average. And the other amazing number was that you heard the saying, people say, people who use the road should pay for the roads. This is to, we should increase gas taxes and we should increase registration fees. Well, first of all, that doesn't apply to bicycles, apparently, with a die-in a little. It also doesn't apply to buses because fares make up 3% of the total revenue of SMART. It receives a 97% subsidy from you and me.
No kidding. That's amazing.
Amazing.
All right. That'll do it for us for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Pray for Officer Schurr. No second trial, please. And until next time, guys, thanks as always for all you do for liberty. Until then, peace.